How did Grand Admiral Thrawn meet Palpatine for the very first time? Have you ever heard the saying, fake it until you make it? Well, Thrawn did just that, and he did this to join the Empire until he finally achieved his goal, to meet Emperor Palpatine. Thrawn was always one step ahead of his enemies, and let's just say this was no different here. Let's get right into it. It all started during around the time when the Galactic Empire first rose to power. Thrawn worked with what was called the Chiss Ascendancy. It was basically like a body of government in the Chiss territories throughout the unknown regions. For those that don't know, the Chiss were Thrawn's species. Now, Thrawn was extremely loyal to his people, but the Chiss Ascendancy started to get really worried when they heard about the Empire. I mean, they saw Palpatine rise to power and they were really afraid of how much power he actually had. So, in order to find out the truth, Thrawn was sent to discover this mystery. And to do this, he faked his own exile to really see if they were a threat or not. He did this by making it look like he lived on an unknown planet for many years. His hair was long, his clothes were ripped, and he did all of this in hopes that the Empire would eventually show up. Thankfully, his plan worked. The Empire finally arrived at this unknown planet and they began to explore around. During their time here, Thrawn decided to kind of mess with them a little bit by planting explosives and constantly wiping out squadrons of troopers. Thrawn even decided to take one of the troopers' armor and disguise himself with it. Eventually, Thrawn did get captured while in his armor, but remember when I said earlier that Thrawn was always one step ahead of his enemies? Yeah, well, let's just say this was all part of his plan. After he was captured, a young cadet named Eli Vanto recognized Thrawn's species and that he was a Chiss. While Thrawn was not great at the language of Basic, Eli understood a small amount of Thrawn's language, which was called Cybisti. Because Eli understood him, he was then assigned as Thrawn's translator. Eli was very confused because he didn't really think they would take Thrawn with them. He thought they would just leave him behind on that planet. But instead, Thrawn would be taken to Coruscant. He was brought with them so Palpatine could learn more about this Chiss species. Thrawn's ultimate plan to meet Palpatine kept getting closer and closer. Eventually they arrived at Coruscant and Thrawn was presented in front of Palpatine for the very first time. He began to tell Palpatine that he would be a great asset to the Empire and he could really help them. Thrawn also told Palpatine that he would provide him with information about the unknown regions, as long as Palpatine would take his people into consideration for the future. Palpatine was very unconvinced by Thrawn and he really didn't care or see much use for him, until something changed. Thrawn told Palpatine that he fought alongside his former servant, Anakin Skywalker. During the Clone Wars, Thrawn and Anakin actually fought side by side on a mission once and they gained a mutual respect for one another. If you want to learn more about that interaction, I did attach a video up above. But anyways, after Thrawn mentioned Anakin, this is when things started to really catch Palpatine's eye. Palpatine started to see Thrawn in a different way now and started to really remember how highly Anakin spoke of him at the time. He then told Thrawn that it was a real shame that Anakin died at the end of the Clone Wars. This of course hiding Anakin's true identity. They both agreed what a great warrior he was, and after this conversation, Palpatine then decided to accept Thrawn into the Royal Imperial Academy on Coruscant. This is where Thrawn would then begin his future with the Empire and eventually work his way up to the position of Grand Admiral. I did attach below both the comic and the novel where you can read this, so if you get the chance, I highly recommend to check this out. But what do you think about Thrawn, and where would he rank among your top villains in the Empire? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching and may the Force be with you always.